And I'll start off with this thing about the demand. And, this is the good news. I mean, if you remember, it wasn't a long time ago, even, where we had these forums where there were questions, and I think it came from the audience to say, look, will customers ever fly again to the same extent? Will the business that you are in actually be back to the levels that we've seen in 2019? And I think we can say already right now that, adamantly what we argued all along, absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. And whether this is a pent-up demand or whether it is a new level of demand, we know now that people are putting this in terms of flying and traveling and taking their holiday, visiting friends and family, as in many cases, in many markets, as the number one thing that they want to do. We've seen that there have been changes throughout the pandemic with COVID that refers to how you want to work, mobile working, hybrid working. But one thing that is really, really clear in all the service that we do is travel and experiences comes up on top. So that's the great news. That's the great thing. And we're seeing this also in the demand. In 2022, where, if we remind ourselves, I think it was only about this time last year that we saw some of the last travel restrictions were being unwinded. In that year, we saw that there were 9.3 million flights in 2022, which is equivalent to some 83% of the capacity that we had in 2019. This year, we're looking at that 9.3 million to go up to 10.2 million, which is 92% of 2019 capacity. And it's actually, if you're looking at the loading of those numbers, I think that at the end of the summer, we're going to be back and some airlines will be over and above those levels as well that we had in 2019. And this is really great because fundamentally, there was a debate not long ago whether actually is travel going to come back because of what has happened since the pandemic, and now we know that is the case. Now, one of the other questions that we also get a lot asked about and what we have focused a lot on, how can we make sure that we deliver a great experience for our customers? Safety and a great experience for the customer is really what this is all about. Now, the issue around this, and this is where I come back to Michael's point, that airlines is only one part of the aviation sector. But the fact is that since we are picking up the cost and we are consumer-facing to our customers, we are being seen as liable for everything that can go wrong in that chain. And we have a number of examples now with ATC, with air traffic controls, and then also airports, who causes us to do the delays and cancellations when the airlines are picking up the bill for that, and also the blame for consumers without having them to support and contribute into that process. And that just simply has to change. There's otherwise no incentives for them to do anything to the point that was raised before. But I think one of the things, and we discussed it at day 3 here last night and this morning, we have all gone through the suppliers to the extent we can. We have all made sure that we can do whatever we can to deliver a fantastic experience. But as we're seeing, as of today, with the cancellation that takes place, with the delays that takes place, that is simply out of our control, there is a huge challenge in here that relates to more than what the airlines can do. And that's the reason why we want to bring attention to this at this forum. And we need to, and we will work with our colleagues around this to make sure we can deliver a good experience as possible for the customers. But we need to see some action when it comes to the things that Michael was mentioning when these things happen. And related to that is then also the question about the airspace reform. If we can just go to that one as well. This is a really interesting one, and it's also it's almost an exhausting one to talk about because we have talked about it for so long. And I know the question that's going to come up when we do the Q&A here, and I think I see the gentleman, I remember to say that what is going to change right now in terms of the fact that this has been debated now for over 20 years. The solution that the single European sky was going to give us is adamantly clear and is very much there. The difference is now when you look at what this can contribute to the things that is really a top priority for this industry and how to decarbonize is the enormous amount of savings on CO2 emissions if we could now finally getting this done. And this is what the decision makers have to realize. It is the quickest and the most efficient, the least expensive action we can take today to actually reduce CO2 emissions from this industry. And I've taken an example here. This is an Easyjet, an example, on the route that actually not only Easyjet flies to, but it's between Paris and Milan, and we fly this frequently on an everyday. We have taken that route and we have measured what the fuel burn is on that. And if we compare that to what we could deliver with what Single European Sky would promise, we would save 19% of CO2 on each and every one of those flights. 19%. And this is one example that we have across the network. Now, the thing about this is that if you're then taking a look at to say, well, what is the cost of actually removing CO2 from there? What is the cost of the activities that takes place and the technologies that are there? It is by far the cheapest way on removing a CO2 ton of carbon emissions in the air. Way cheaper than ETS, not in the scale of carbon removal technologies, and SAF is just way, way out there. And I think what we need to do, and we discussed this here with A4E, we need to be able to translate what the costs are in terms of money, to actually translate what it means in CO2 savings, in carbon emission savings. Because I think that's going to be a highly uncomfortable argument for decision makers why this isn't done and why this is not being introduced as well. So we must focus on creating the delivery of this reform that has been so much out there for such a long time as well, and really do it for the sake of the planet, and really do it for the sake of also the industry to continue to thrive and to continue also to grow in the future.